4-year-old Lucas, rescued from a house fire by a brave fireman, kept repeating 2 words that unsettled everyone around him: "Bad Daddy." As the fire was brought under control, the attention quickly shifted from the flames to Lucas's troubling words. An officer, feeling a growing sense of unease, decided to investigate further inside the house. The moment the officer stepped into the dimly lit hallway, he knew something was terribly amiss and immediately called for backup. Officer James was standing in the burned-down hallway of little Lucas's house. As he looked around, an eerie feeling washed over him. He wondered if the 2 words little Lucas kept repeating were more than just a little boy in shock. As he stepped through the burned debris, he began to understand there could be more at play here. "I'm going to need immediate backup," he said through his radio. We actually really need you back here," his colleague carefully answered through the radio. Officer James stopped in his tracks. "What do you mean?" he asked confusedly. When his colleague began to speak again, Officer James could hear the frantic screams of little Lucas on the other end of the line. Officer James's stomach dropped. What was going on there? He had to make a choice: stay and investigate the awful feeling he got from this house, or go back and see what was going on with little Lucas. Officer James sighed as he stepped into a room that looked like it could have been Lucas's room before it burned down. He picked up a melted toy truck that still felt warm to the touch. As he stood in the room, he could hear Lucas screaming bloody murder outside. "Don't go in there!" he yelled. Officer James walked up to the window and saw Lucas being held by one of the officers outside, kicking his legs in the air. He was trying everything to escape from the officer's grip, but Lucas was nowhere near strong enough. The sight of Lucas so upset formed a knot in Officer James's stomach. Something horrible must have happened in here, and there was no doubt little James knew exactly what. Determined to find out the truth, Officer James decided to stay inside and search through the house. There had to be something in here that would tell him what the heck happened. He radioed his colleague again, saying he really needed some backup inside the house. His voice was urgent, probably the reason why his colleague decided to send in 2 more officers. When they arrived at Officer James's side, he explained the situation to them. They had to find out why little Lucas screamed "Bad Daddy" and what had caused the house to go up in flames. And more importantly, where Lucas's father was. You see, little Lucas was the only person the firemen had been able to save from the burning building. And when they did the walkthrough after the fire was out, there was no sign of anyone else left behind. The officers outside were already trying to reach little Lucas's parents by phone, but until now, only the mother had answered. She had been very upset by the news and told the officers she would rush home immediately. It wasn't clear to Officer James if she had already arrived or not, but if she did, she had a lot to explain. "Hey, James, you have to see this!" one of his colleagues yelled from the living room. Officer James hastily made his way there, and when he saw what his colleague held in his hands, his stomach dropped. "Where did you find that, Tom?" Officer James asked his colleague. Tom pointed at the ground. There was a little square spot on the ground that was clean, as if it wasn't even touched by the fire. "Quickly bag that up and send it to forensics. If it is what I think it is, we have a serious case here," Officer James said urgently. Officer Tom quickly did as James ordered and rushed outside. Officer James looked out of the window and saw Lucas's reaction to what Officer Tom had brought outside. He instantly stopped screaming and almost looked a little frightened. This case was something Officer James had never dealt with before, and he didn't like the feeling he got from it. "The mother arrived," Officer James's colleague said over the radio. "All right, I'm coming out," Officer James answered. He was far from done with this house, but first he had to question the mother. Maybe she knew where Lucas's father was and what he had to do with the fire. When Officer James stepped outside, he instantly knew who the mother was. "Oh, Lucas! My baby!" the mother frantically cried as she hugged her son. Lucas melted into her arms, but not for long. He quickly shot up and repeated the words he had said when he was rescued from the burning house. "Bad daddy," he said as he looked his mother in the eyes. Officer James saw how taken aback she was by those words. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Officer James," he said as he approached the mother. "We need to ask you some questions regarding your house and your husband." "My husband?" the mother confusedly repeated. "My husband is at work like he always is on Monday." Her voice was certain, but Officer James could hear a slight tremor. Could she be telling the truth? But Officer James already knew that Lucas's father wasn't at work that day, as they had already tried to reach him there. When he told Lucas's mother this, he could see the color draining from her face. "But he left for work early this morning," she said, full of disbelief. "I'm afraid he had other plans," Officer James responded. "Do you have any idea where he might be?" Lucas's mother, her eyes brimming with tears, stood across from Officer James, staring at her burned-down house. "I just can't believe it," she murmured, shaking her head. "He's always been a loving father and husband. There's no way he could be involved in something like this." Her voice quivered with a mixture of disbelief and fear, echoing through the sparse room. "He's always been there for us," she continued, gripping her hands tightly together. "Every birthday, every holiday, he's never missed a single moment with Lucas." Her eyes searched Officer James's face, seeking an understanding that seemed just out of reach. "This whole situation makes no sense to me. He's a good man, officer, a good man. We've had a normal life, a happy one," she insisted, her voice growing more assertive. "Our home has always been filled with love and laughter, not secrets and lies." She looked away, her gaze lost in distant memories. "I don't understand how our world has turned upside down overnight. It just doesn't add up." Officer James felt sorry for her. She seemed like an honest woman. "I never saw any signs, officer. Nothing that would hint at this," she said, her voice trailing off into a whisper as she pointed at her house. The air around her felt heavy with shock and confusion. "Our life was ordinary, peaceful. I can't fathom how it led to this disaster. It's like a nightmare that I can't wake up from." Despite Officer James's gentle but persistent questions, she remained unwavering. "My husband is innocent. I know him better than anyone. He couldn't do this." Her voice was steady now, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around her before. Her conviction seemed to be the only solid ground she could hold on to. Knowing Lucas's mother wouldn't be of any help, Officer James, with determination etched on his face, directed the forensic team. "We need to know everything," he instructed firmly. "How the fire started, why it spread so quickly. Everything." He watched as they methodically began their work, scouring through the debris with a practiced eye, every piece potentially a key to the puzzle. The days following were fraught with a tense waiting game. Officer James found himself frequently calling the forensic team for updates, each time with a growing sense of urgency. The house, the mother's confusion, Lucas's words, they all swirled in his mind, forming a knot of unanswered questions. He knew the answers lay hidden in the ashes, just out of reach. While waiting for the forensic results, Officer James revisited the burned house. He moved carefully through each room, his eyes scanning for anything that might have been missed. Every charred item, every mark on the walls was scrutinized as he tried to piece together the events leading up to the fire. The house felt like a cryptic maze, with its secrets locked within the ruins. The anticipation was palpable as Officer James awaited the forensic report. He understood that the key to understanding the tragedy lay in those results. Each hour of waiting seemed to stretch longer, the pieces of the puzzle hovering just out of reach. But he held on to hope that soon the scattered pieces would come together, unveiling the truth behind the tragic event. With determination, Officer James mobilized his team for a widespread search. "We need to find Lucas's father. Fast," he instructed, mapping out potential areas on a large city map. Patrol cars were dispatched, alerts were sent out, and the local community was notified. It was a race against time, with each officer understanding the gravity of their mission as they fanned out across the city. Every lead they followed seemed to vanish into thin air. Addresses turned out outdated. Sightings were unconfirmed. Officer James felt each dead end like a personal setback. He pored over reports late into the night, tracing and retracing steps, looking for what they might have missed. The frustration in the air was palpable, as each lead dissolved into nothing more than a mirage. Interviews with relatives and close friends of Lucas's father brought little clarity. "He's just a regular guy," they'd say, or "We haven't seen him in weeks." Officer James noted the confusion and worry on their faces. None seemed to hold the key to his whereabouts, and their genuine surprise added another layer of complexity to the case. At the father's workplace, colleagues expressed similar bewilderment. "He left for a business trip," one said, but there were no records of such a trip. Officer James stood in the father's vacant office, a sense of unease growing. The pieces weren't adding up. The more he delved into the father's life, the more enigmatic it seemed to become. The search for Lucas's father became an all-consuming task. Officer James felt the weight of each passing hour. The community's concern grew, and so did the pressure. Leads were followed, only to lead to more questions. The father had vanished like a ghost, leaving behind a trail of confusion and a son in desperate need of answers. Officer James's restlessness escalated with the passing days. The absence of concrete evidence and the father's continued disappearance weighed heavily on him. Each morning he arrived at the station hoping for a breakthrough, only to be met with the same puzzling silence. The unanswered questions loomed large, casting a shadow over his every thought, making the days seem longer and more arduous. The silence from the forensic team was deafening. The empty halls of the police station echoed with the unspoken fears of what might be revealed. Officer James walked these halls, feeling the tension in the air. The void left by the lack of results and the missing father created an ominous, almost tangible presence, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Lying awake at night, Officer James was haunted by the case. Lucas's words, "Bad Daddy," echoed in his mind, intertwining with the stark absence of his father. It gnawed at him, this gnarling suspicion that they were dealing with something far more sinister than a mere accident. The darkness of the unknown seemed to spread, clouding his thoughts with unease and foreboding. Years on the force had honed Officer James's instincts, and they screamed that this was no ordinary case. Every fiber of his being told him there was something deeply wrong, a malignancy lurking beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward case. He trusted his intuition, knowing it seldom led him astray, but wishing this time it was wrong. With each passing day, the tension in the station grew. Officer James and his team worked tirelessly, combing through evidence, revisiting the scene, and re-interviewing witnesses. The community's growing concern was palpable, a constant reminder of the urgency of their task. All eyes were on them, waiting, hoping for the breakthrough that would bring clarity to the unsettling mystery. In a room adorned with colorful drawings and soft toys, Officer James knelt to be at eye level with Lucas. His voice was soft, his questions simple and open-ended. "Can you tell me about that day, Lucas?" he asked gently. Lucas, clutching a small stuffed bear, glanced up with wide, uncertain eyes, the innocence in his gaze a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. Lucas's mother sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his back. Her presence was a silent pillar of strength for Lucas, yet her eyes betrayed her own fears and anxieties. Every so often, Lucas would look to her for reassurance, and she'd offer a comforting smile, though it never quite reached her eyes. Her worry was palpable, adding a poignant layer to the interview. Lucas's account was fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle not quite fitting together. "There were loud noises," he whispered, his small voice barely above a murmur. "And it was hot." His descriptions were sparse, childlike in their simplicity, but behind each word lay a depth of experience too complex for his young age to fully articulate. Officer James navigated the conversation with careful tact, aware of the delicate nature of questioning a child. "What happened next, Lucas?" he asked softly. Lucas fidgeted, his responses interspersed with long pauses, as if searching for the right words within his young mind. Each answer, though brief, was a vital clue, a small window into the events of that fateful day, striking a balance between the need for information and Lucas's emotional well-being was a tightrope walk. Officer James trod lightly, mindful of the trauma Lucas had endured. The boy's well-being was paramount, yet every piece of information he could provide was crucial. It was a slow, painstaking process, but one that James approached with patience and a deep sense of responsibility. Lucas's words were veiled in a child's ambiguity. "I was hiding," he said, his voice a mere whisper. "And there were shadows, lots of shadows." His eyes looked distant, as if visualizing a memory only he could see. Officer James listened intently, aware that these cryptic utterances were pieces of a larger, more complex puzzle, hidden in the innocent language of a child. The statements Lucas made were enigmatic, leaving more questions than answers. "The shadows were loud," he murmured, frowning slightly. Officer James noted every word, every expression. The ominous nature of these comments, though unclear, hinted at something unsettling. It was like trying to decipher a code, where each word could mean something far beyond its simple interpretation. With each vague statement from Lucas, his mother's distress grew. Her face, a canvas of worry, reflected the confusion and fear these words evoked. "What shadows, Lucas? What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Officer James pondered over Lucas's words, attempting to read between the lines. "Shadows, hiding, loud noises," he repeated quietly to himself. Were these the confused perceptions of a scared child, or were they indicative of something more? Each phrase, though cryptic, was a clue, potentially a key to unlocking the truth of what transpired in that house. Observing the mother's reactions, Officer James found himself questioning the undercurrents of her responses. Was her distress solely born of concern for her son, or was there an element of fear, perhaps of a truth she wasn't ready to face? Her protective instincts were evident, but so was a certain hesitation, a reluctance that piqued James's curiosity and concern. The long-awaited forensic report finally arrived, bringing with it a significant breakthrough. The analysis confirmed that the fire was intentional. Most crucially, the clean, square spot in the living room was identified as the location of a fireproof safe. This revelation shifted the nature of the investigation, pointing unmistakably towards arson, a deliberate act meant to destroy, but also to conceal. Among the forensic findings, one detail stood out starkly. Fingerprints on the remnants of the safe, unmistakably identified as belonging to Lucas's father. This discovery was a critical piece of the puzzle, irrefutably linking him to the scene before the fire. The implications were profound and troubling, painting a picture of premeditation that was hard to ignore. The evidence of arson, combined with the discovery of the safe, pointed towards a chilling conclusion. The fire had been planned. It was a scenario fraught with peril and dark intentions. Officer James pondered the implications, the pieces of the puzzle forming a sinister image. The case had taken a grave turn, indicating a level of planning that was both alarming and perplexing. The direct link to Lucas's father shifted the focus of the investigation dramatically. His fingerprints on the safe were silent but damning testimonies of his presence and involvement. It was a connection that could not be ignored or explained away. Officer James felt a mix of vindication and dismay. The clues were aligning, but they painted a picture he wished was not true. This new evidence marked a pivotal moment in the case. What had started as a tragic fire was now a complex investigation into deliberate arson. Officer James understood the gravity of these findings. They not only pointed to a suspect, but also hinted at motives and actions far more calculated and sinister than anyone had initially imagined. The course of the investigation had changed irreversibly. With newfound urgency, Officer James escalated the search for Lucas's father. Nationwide alerts were issued, descriptions circulated, and checkpoints established. The police network buzzed with activity, as every officer understood the critical need to locate him. James coordinated the efforts, his resolve steeling with each passing hour, knowing that time was a luxury they couldn't afford in this race against the unknown. The search expanded beyond city limits, reaching national and international law enforcement agencies. Interpol was alerted, and airports were put on high watch. Officer James worked tirelessly, liaising with global counterparts, sharing information, and strategizing. The case had grown from a local tragedy to a manhunt with global ramifications, the stakes higher than ever. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity to Officer James. The urgency to find Lucas's father before he could potentially flee or cause further harm was palpable. The team worked around the clock, following every lead, every hint of a trail. It was a race against time, and the tension in the command center was a constant reminder of what was at stake. Despite the mounting evidence, Lucas's mother clung to her belief in her husband's innocence. "He wouldn't do this," she repeated to anyone who would listen. Her denial was a fortress she refused to abandon, even as the walls of evidence closed in around her. Officer James observed her reactions, torn between empathy and the harsh reality of the facts before them. The investigation began to narrow its focus as bits of information started to form a clearer picture of the father's potential whereabouts. Officer James and his team sifted through mountains of data, tracing financial transactions and communications. Each piece brought them closer, the net tightening around a man who had become the central figure in a mystery that had captivated and horrified the community. At the bustling airport, Officer James and his team blended into the crowd, eyes sharply scanning for Lucas's father. Each officer was positioned strategically, covering all exits and entrances. James, watching from a discreet vantage point, felt the tension rise. The airport, a hub of movement and noise, was the backdrop for a crucial moment in their search, a carefully orchestrated operation to end the chase. The terminal was a sea of faces, a mix of travelers oblivious to the drama unfolding among them. Officer James's focus was unyielding, his team communicating through subtle signals. As boarding announcements echoed, the anticipation built to a crescendo. Every passenger passing by ratcheted the tension higher, the team poised for action, waiting for the moment of truth. Just as a final boarding call was made, Lucas's father appeared, his figure instantly recognizable to the trained eyes of the officers. As he approached the gate, the team converged with swift precision. Officer James watched as his father was detained, the surprise and realization dawning on his face. The arrest was smooth, a culmination of relentless pursuit and strategy. In the moment of his arrest, a tumult of emotions crossed Lucas's father's face. There was surprise, then a dawning resignation, a silent surrender to the inevitable. Officer James observed this closely, reading the signs of a man whose plans had unraveled, whose final attempt at escape had been thwarted. In his surrender, there was an unspoken acknowledgement, a story yet to be told. With the father in custody, a new chapter in the investigation began. Officer James knew that the arrest was just the first step in uncovering the layers of mystery surrounding the case. Now, in their grasp, the father was the key to unraveling the questions that had haunted them. The revelations were about to unfold, and with them, the true motives behind a tragedy that had shaken the community. During the search of Lucas's father's belongings, officers uncovered a trove of fake IDs and a variety of documents under different names. Each ID was expertly crafted, an unsettling testament to the lengths he had gone to assume alternate identities. These discoveries painted a picture of a man deeply enmeshed in deception, far removed from the image of an ordinary family man. Further investigation led to a rented storage unit, registered under one of the false identities. Inside, officers found boxes of new personal belongings and furniture, still wrapped and unopened. This secret cache suggested meticulous preparation, a parallel life set up in anticipation of a swift departure. The storage unit stood as silent evidence of a planned escape, each item a piece of a larger, sinister puzzle. The items in the storage unit, alongside the false documents, pointed unmistakably to plans for a new life elsewhere. Receipts for large cash withdrawals and brochures for overseas properties were among the papers found. These were not the impulsive acts of a desperate man, but the calculated steps of someone intending to vanish completely and start afresh, leaving his old life in ashes. With each discovery, the extent of the father's duplicity came into sharper focus. Bank statements, emails, and notes found in his office revealed a web of lies and financial troubles. Officer James sifted through the evidence, each piece further unraveling the facade of the life Lucas's father had presented to the world. The depth of his deceit was staggering, a betrayal that went far beyond the fire. The investigation now revealed the father's double life in full detail. He had skillfully maintained the illusion of a normal, happy family man while secretly orchestrating a departure from that life. His actions were those of a man living on the edge of two worlds, each step meticulously planned. It was a revelation that shocked not just Lucas's family, but the entire investigating team. In the stark interrogation room, under the relentless gaze of Officer James, Lucas's father finally crumbled. The facade he had so carefully constructed over the years fell away, piece by piece, under the weight of undeniable evidence. His shoulders slumped, and a weary sigh escaped his lips. The truth, it seemed, was a burden too heavy to bear any longer. His voice, once firm, now faltered as he confessed to setting the fire. "I wanted to disappear, start over," he whispered, his words laced with regret. The plan had been to fake his death, to escape the crushing weight of his financial ruin. It was a desperate act, born from desperation and a twisted sense of hopelessness. The confession hung heavy in the air, a stark admission of guilt. As he spoke, a tale of debts, lies, and deceit unfolded. His life, it appeared, had been a precarious balancing act, one that had finally toppled over. The financial burdens he carried were immense, leading him down a path of deception that spiraled out of control. His confession laid bare the depth of his despair and the lengths to which he had gone to escape it. In a moment of raw honesty, Lucas's father admitted he had not known Lucas was in the house. "I thought he was at school," he said, his voice breaking with the realization of his grave oversight. The horror of what could have happened to his son in the fire he set was a truth that visibly shook him. A father's guilt etched in every line of his face. It was then revealed that Lucas had unexpectedly returned home during recess, a fact unknown to his father. This unforeseen twist of fate placed Lucas in danger unbeknownst to anyone. The father listened, his face a portrait of shock and horror, as Officer James explained how Lucas, unbeknownst to all, had walked into a scenario that was never meant to involve him. Lucas's father, now a forlorn figure, was formally charged and brought to trial. The courtroom was a stark arena where his fate would be decided. As he stood before the judge, The weight of his actions was palpable. Officer James, present in the courtroom, watched as the legal process unfolded, marking the culmination of their exhaustive investigation and the beginning of justice being served. The trial proceeded with an urgency driven by the overwhelming evidence. Lucas's father's confession, corroborated by the forensic analysis and the discoveries of his dual life, left little room for doubt. Testimonies and exhibits painted a clear, unflinching picture of premeditation and deceit. The truth, once obscured, was now laid bare for all to see in the light of the courtroom. The gavel fell, and Lucas's father received a significant prison sentence. The verdict resonated through the courtroom, a definitive end to months of uncertainty and turmoil. For Officer James, it was a moment of solemn satisfaction, the conclusion of a case that had tested his resolve and determination. For Lucas and his mother, it was a painful yet necessary step towards closure. In the aftermath of the trial, Lucas and his mother embarked on a long journey of healing. Their world, once shattered by tragedy and betrayal, slowly began to mend. Support from the community and counseling helped them navigate their grief and loss. The resilience they showed, the strength to rebuild from the ashes, was a testament to the indomitable spirit of those touched by adversity. The story of Lucas and his mother concluded with a forward gaze toward a future filled with hope. Their journey through darkness and back into the light was a poignant reminder of the power of resilience and healing. As they walked hand in hand, leaving the courthouse behind, it was clear that a new chapter in their lives was beginning, one marked by hope and the promise of new beginnings.